Hello and welcome. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Decimated, technically defeated, dislodged. But these are some of the regularly used terms by the government when describing the fight against terrorism. But then we've also seen terms like regrouping, resurgence, and even merging together of these terrorists in recent times. Well, the most recent is happening in an area that has not been in the news for terrorist activities, and that's Nasarawa State, which is why Governor Abdullahi Sule is calling the president's attention to what he calls the havoc being perpetrated by Boko Haram insurgents in his state. He made the comments today after he met with President Muhammadu Buhari at the State House in Abuja. He said many of the insurgents belonging to Dar es Salaam Group who were actively operating within the state have been killed through a joint security operation, but then he is appealing to the president for further intervention. Here's what he said.
Come to see the leader of our party and the leader of the nation and our father, Mr. President, to brief him about some of the activities happening in the state. First, especially in the area of security, that we continue to have challenges with a team of Boko Haram who were settled at the border with the FCT. And we thank the security forces that they have been able to dislodge them. But now they have gone back and gathered at our border with Benue, and they are causing a lot of havoc. When they dislodged them, a lot of them were killed, some of them ran away and leave their members of the family. We took hostage about 900 members of that family into life here, including children and their wives. So during the interrogation, they confirmed themselves that they were indeed Boko Haram. And some of them say they were remnants of the Dar es Salaam group that were dislodged from Niger. So they came and merged up and then became the Boko Haram. So that's where we got our confirmation that they were indeed Boko Haram from themselves. Therefore, it was an opportunity Mr. President wanted to know, so I briefed him. And I strongly believe, just like decision was taken last time to take care of this, another decision will be taken to do this.
So this is a new dimension, you might say, to the fight against terrorism. But then some people continue to wonder why governors have to make that trip to the nation's capital, Abuja, when they are faced with major challenges such as this one. Incidentally, that ties into our big topic tonight. The restructuring debate is back. Well, it never really left in the first place, but the clamor is again nearing fever pitch. What is different this time around? Well, maybe the prominent personalities adding their voice to the debate. We have former President Goodluck Jonathan, Chief John Wodo, Pa Ayo Adebanjo, Professor Tahiru Jega, even the presidency and the National Assembly have weighed in as well. So clearly this is a big deal, but then they're not all saying the same thing. Well, take former President Goodluck Jonathan, for example. For him, he says that discussion on restructuring will not help except we restructure our minds, because some of the challenging issues at the national level still exist at the state and local levels. He went on to list some of these challenges as nepotism, ethnic and religious differences. But then there remains the question of how. Well, for the former President General of Ohanaeze Ndigbo, Chief John Wodo, to restructure Nigeria, we need a constitutional conference of the ethnic groups. He believes that using the current National Assembly as a forum for constitutional amendments, according to him, grants a tacit recognition of the overthrow of our democratic norms by the enthronement of a military constitution by which they are composed. But that's not all. Afenifere chieftain Pa Ayo Adebanjo's grouse is with the constitution. And here's what he says. This is not the constitution that Nnamdi Azikiwe, the Sardauna of Sokoto, and Chief Obafemi Awolowo agreed to. All the problems we're having today is because of the fraudulent constitution that we are operating today. But then there's a question also of what do we restructure? So there's the how question, but also important is what? And here's what former INEC chairman thinks. He says the best way to do it is to look at the legislative list and deconcentrate power from the federal government, which has been concentrated under military rule. devolve them back to the state and give commensurate resources to the state. So that's from former INEC chairman, Professor Tahiru Jega. And now we have the presidency's side also adding its voice to the debate by stating its position on the call for restructuring. The SSA to the president on media and publicity, Garba Shehu, says that whichever name you call it, the government is not opposed to it. What we are saying is that the parliament is the body empowered by law to effect any change in the nation's structure. So you will think that with all these numerous views about restructuring, we will have done something at least concrete in the over 20 years of the Fourth Republic. But here we are again. Is this the time when we really move ahead with these issues and get it done? Well, let's join our guests tonight on the program. Senator Olalekan Mustafa is the chairman, Senate Committee on State and Local Government Affairs. He joins us virtually from Ijebu-Ode, and right here in our studio, Mr. Ajiti Ogunye, a legal practitioner. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, Mr. Ogunye, just a moment. Let me begin with Senator Olalekan Mustafa, because, I mean, he was a part of the Joint Committee of the National Assembly on Constitution Review, that's the JCCR, as far back as 2008. So let's just take a trip down memory lane for a moment. What happened to that process? Because clearly it didn't achieve much. And here we are again, going down a similar path at the National Assembly. Senator Olalekan, can you hear me? Okay, well, we'll try to resolve that. Maybe it's a button you might have to press there. So let's come back to the studio. Mr. Ogunye, you've listened to the different views, and this is not the first time we've had this conversation. With you in particular regarding restructuring and our road to true federalism, is there anything different this time around from the views and opinions you have heard?
No, it's just like we are merely regurgitating what has been said before, ad nauseum, almost indefinitely and all that. And everybody is weighing, saying almost the same thing and nothing gets done. My view is that we need to restructure Nigeria because Nigeria is still being structured as we speak. For example, when you take a water bill to the National Assembly, to then say that all waters in the country should not be managed by a central body, you are still structuring Nigeria, right? So we need to restructure it. And why we're talking about restructuring, people have asked the question, what do you need to restructure? Everything under the Nigerian political, economic, social, governmental sun has to be restructured, because this was not the Nigerian that was given by the British colonialists. And it's not as if Nigerians are necessarily enamored of that which was given to us by the colonial, which was negotiated. It is just that between the time the British left and the time the military eventually left, if they had left, in a sense, you know, the military from 1966 tinkered, no, not even tinker, restructured Nigeria so fundamentally that Nigeria then became centrist. Powers became concentrated at the center. The resources of the country were similarly concentrated at the center, rather than having resource control by the regions, by the states. You know, the federal government is now the one controlling resources, most of those resources and all that. So you need to restructure those things in such a way that equity, justice will reign, so that the historical injustices, right, the imbalances, and the iniquities that had been structured into the Nigeria that we then received in 1999, protected by the 1999 Constitution, right, can be unbundled, and then we'll have fairness and justice. That's, in the main, what is being said about restructuring.
Okay, well, like you said, this is not the first time. And I think the challenge here is we're hoping this maybe will be the last time, really, that we'll discuss this. But specifically speaking, the issues on ground are quite different from what we had previously. For example, the National Assembly has kickstarted that constitution review process. You listen to what the presidency said, saying that only the National Assembly can achieve this. So help us understand, is there a difference between constitution review and restructuring? Because clearly it appears there's an issue with that.
The issue, the fundamental difference is that realistically, to restructure Nigeria, you need a constitutional conference or a sovereign national conference. And we've argued that the reason why it is sovereign is that its decisions must be accepted, subject only to a referendum, so that there will be no executive or an existing National Assembly that will tinker with the decision of such a body. Outside the current constitutional framework. Why? Because it is not usually given to man to shed power. For example, if we are to restructure Nigeria realistically, people have called for unicameral legislature, they've called for pruning down the number of political representation, they've called for smaller and efficient government. By the way, in Senegal, in recent time, they had a bicameral legislature. Reality forced them to adopt a unicameral legislature at the state to save funds. Those who are in the National Assembly now are part of those who are to be restructured. It is not given unto them. It won't happen that they will restructure themselves out of existence.
It's interesting you bring this up, Mr. Ogunye. Just a moment. We have Senator Mustafa here. So let's get him, because you referred to those in the National Assembly. Yes. So Senator Mustafa, I believe you've been following the conversation. We'll still get to what happened in 2008, but I'd like to get your response to what Mr. Ogunye said, saying that, well, it might be tricky, really, for the National Assembly to achieve this restructuring which we're talking about. What are your thoughts on that? Okay, I hear that the connection is
well, thank you very much.
Okay, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, finally.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I had the last part of what Barrister Ogunye said. He said it might not be possible for the National Assembly to.
Well, Senator Mustafa, please do me this favor. Don't listen to your television set. Just speak to me. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. He said it might not be possible for National Assembly to restructure themselves. It may not be totally correct saying that, because don't forget that members of the National Assembly are not going to be there forever. It's a tenured position. So therefore, it is possible for people to, when they know that what we are asking for is reasonable and sensible, it is very possible for the members of the National Assembly to agree with the submissions and the position of the generality of Nigerians. So it is very possible.
So do you see a difference, really, between constitutional review and restructuring? Because for Mr. Ogunye, they're not quite the same. Okay, Mr. Ogunye, while we try to resolve that, so we've tried to break it down into the how and who. Of course, there's a what we need to restructure, there's a why and the when. But just to put this in context, take the example, for example, of the governor of Nasarawa State. He had to travel all the way to Abuja to talk about an issue he's facing in his state, to sort of get help from the nation's capital. That's one. Another example is the governor of Ondo State, Rotimi Akeredolu, SAN, who's had to make some pronouncements, give an ultimatum to herders occupying a certain area of forest reserves to leave as a result of insecurity. Interestingly, this is all tied to insecurity. So how do you see restructuring solving this? Because this is a what? This is security.
Look, we need to restructure the police system. People have called it all sorts of names, state police. People have said that governor will be using state police to persecute their political adversary or opponents and all that. Policing is local. And that's how policing started in Nigeria, for example. I've often cited the example, and the scholars that have done serious work on this. The Egba native police started with Egba unity government in 1905. And between that 1905, we had native authority police all over the country before they were outlawed altogether in 1970. Meaning that for many years, we have local provincial police in Nigeria. But now, many people didn't know that we say no to state police, no to local police. And now, in lieu of that, the federal government that has recognized that policing has to be localized is now talking about community police that will still be controlled largely from the center. That is a subterfuge. That is a counterfeit. That is not the real thing. So, talking about security specifically, policing has to be reformed. Then the military. It's not so much about reforming it, but about ensuring that it's put in a position to discharge on its mandate. The truth of the matter is that over time, the military, even under the military, was largely degraded in terms of its capabilities and capacity. Now, you hear about the military, making procurements now, not just because of war, planes, all sort of things that they need to buy to ensure that they are in a position to discharge their responsibility under the Constitution, which is protecting Nigeria from foreign adversaries and local adversaries. So for Nasarawa State, it is not a police action. It's a military action. Bandits cannot be contained by the police like that. These are people who are armed to the teeth. Nigeria is awash with light weapons. Libya is still at war, and most of those weapons found their way here.
Okay, just a moment, Mr. Ogunye. We have Senator Mustafa via phone now, so let's try this one more time. Senator Mustafa, I believe you can hear me now. So please go ahead with the response to my previous question, so we can move ahead.
Yeah, can you please come up with your question again?
Well, the question for the third time is about what happened in 2008. You were part of the JCCR, and yet again we're going down that path. The question is, how are we sure that we'll end up the same way we ended up in 2008 and the previous, attempt to amend or review the Constitution?
Okay, thank you very much. You're trying to create an impression that the exercise of 2008 was a complete waste. No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all, because certain aspects, certain parts of the Constitution were amended, and they were successfully amended. Don't forget that when this amendment to the Constitution, there are in stages. The first stage is to be taken by the National Assembly, that is the House of Reps and the Senate. If both houses agree, it has to go around the 36 states assemblies across the country, and then for any law, for any part of the Constitution to be amended successfully, at least 24 of the 36 state assemblies must agree with the position of the National Assembly. There are so many factors that contributed to some of the failures in the amendment of the Constitution. Let me give you one example. In 2008, we proposed that the state assemblies and the judiciary should be on the first line charge. First line charge means that when states and the federal government are taking their allocations at their Federal Allocation Committee meeting, state assemblies and the judiciary will take their own allocation directly. That way, the state assemblies will not have to go cap in hand to the governors to beg for allocation, to beg for money. When the amendments came through at the National Assembly, and when they were sent to the states, initially, exactly 24 states House of Assembly agreed with the position of the National Assembly. If it had come to the National Assembly just like that, with 24 states agreeing with our position, then it will immediately automatically become an amendment to the constitution. Unfortunately, a few days after 24 state assemblies agreed with our position, one of the 24 that initially agreed with us reconvened, and they withdrew their support for the amendment.
Right.
So that made it to fail. So it wasn't as if it was the National Assembly that set out to take the exercise to a state of failure. No, it wasn't. But then there are some other parts of the amendment that scaled through, and those parts of the constitution were amended. So these days, if you hear people quote some parts of the constitution, they will say that certain parts of the constitution as amended. So if we did not succeed in amending any part of the constitution, nobody will be quoting the constitution as amended.
So, Senator Mustafa, as we wind down now.
So this one that we want to do definitely will not be a failure.
All right.
It will not be a failure.
As we wind down,
what I expect the people to do, what I expect our people to do, because if it's not taken, if care is not taken, we'll just box ourselves into a corner. There will be a stalemate. When people begin to say that yes, the National Assembly has no right to do it because the constitution that they are operating under was put together by the military. Okay, what are they suggesting that we do? Because definitely the National Assembly will not abdicate their responsibilities to a third party.
Okay, well, Senator Mustafa, I was trying to get my question in, but we have to wind down. And just on a final note, Mr. Ogwe, you've seen the statement from the presidency, right, saying that, well, we're not against restructuring. Are you now convinced that we'll get this done, finally?
No, I'm not convinced. It's just political talk. It's political talk. The government at the center has shown sufficient disinterest in the issue of restructuring. So it's just political talk.
Okay, well, the days ahead will really let us know the truth indeed. Mr. G.T. Ogwe, legal practitioner, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, as well as Senator Olalekan Mustafa, Chairman, Senate Committee on State and Local Government Affairs. We appreciate your time as well on the program. Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Kayode Ikedu. Don't forget to stay safe.